I'm Ryan Milliken from Hardway Performance, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
I'm Dimitri Miller with No Zone Diesel.
This is Anthony Rings from XDP.
This is Jaron Holder from Holderdown Performance.
Corey Willis from PPEI.
I'm Drew with D&J Precision Machine.
I'm Pinky.
And you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
Diesel Podcast.
You're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
The Diesel Podcast. The one and only Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're glad you guys could join us today for another episode of the Diesel Podcast. Today we're going to talk about 6-liter injectors. Say specifically if you own a 6-liter and you're wondering, are there ways I can tell the injectors are going out? Or maybe you're looking at a truck and when you check it out, you're looking for some warning signs that the injectors might be having an issue. So we're going to talk about that, when to upgrade them, how big to go with a stock turbo, aftermarket turbo, all that stuff. Before we get to it, though, we want to thank you guys for continuing to rate us on iTunes and commenting with topics that you want to hear about or guests that you'd like to have on. Keep blowing us up on iTunes. We've got a lot of cool episodes lined up based on your guys' direct feedback. We also want to thank ATS Diesel and Dan's Diesel Performance for making this episode possible. If you're looking for bolt-on upgrades, engine builds, transmission builds, pretty much anything, make sure and check out atsdiesel.com and dansdieselperformance.com. I am really excited today. We're going to be talking about 6-liter injectors and how to know if you're looking at a truck if they might be having injector issues, or if you want to upgrade, what are some things to do. So we have Holder's Diesel Performance on today, and we're excited to chat with you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Great. I wanted to have you introduce yourself to our listeners out there. Tell us about your business, how you got into the Powerstroke injector world, and all you guys do there at the shop.
Yeah, so I own Holder's Diesel Performance. We've been in business, in the field for about 10 years now. We're located in Sarasota, Florida. About 8 years ago, I just kind of saw a need for a affordable yet quality 6-liter fuel injector on the market, because we replaced and worked on a lot of them back in the day. And we still do today, but we decided to kind of pursue that to give a customer a very high quality yet affordable stock and performance fuel injector. So just kind of started off there. We acquired some flow bench and some testing equipment, and just kind of started off and digging into it. And after a couple of years, it got to be pretty popular and started selling them all over the place.
It seems like on the feedback that we get from listeners, we got a lot of 6-liter fans, a lot of guys that are looking at those trucks or have them and want to do things to them. How common would you say injector issues are on a 6-liter Powerstroke?
Well, a lot of it just comes down to maintenance of the vehicle, and especially prior to whenever said customer owns it, because a lot of times poor quality oil or people not changing their oil frequent enough can cause the injectors obviously to fail a lot sooner, since they are oil operated, as well as bad fuel. So we've seen them go as much as 200,000 miles on a factory set, but if they're not very well taken care of, it can be a pretty common problem that you see on 6-liters, on a really common basis.
That's what's so unique about them, or what, say, new diesel owners may not be familiar with, is the oil system on that engine. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works, how important the oil is to the fuel system on those trucks?
So basically, these injectors are fired on a high-pressure oil system. It's the same oil that's in your oil pan. And the injectors are actuated with a solenoid, and the high-pressure oil comes in at anywhere at idle. It's around 500 psi, as much as 4,000 psi, and then it comes in the top of the injector and actually fires the injector by an intensifier piston. So you can imagine that if you get bad quality oil or the least bit of contaminants in it at 4,000 psi, it doesn't take a lot to damage even the metal in the fuel injectors. So anything like that can definitely shorten their lifespan.
I bet it can quickly turn really bad for the fuel system if the oil hasn't been changed in a while, or there's contaminants in it or something like that. It's going to do more than just damage the engine itself. It can probably take out an injector set or just cause a whole host of problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
If someone's out there, they're looking at a truck and they're wondering, they've heard about maybe some issues with 6-liter injectors, or they don't know the history of the truck, don't know any of that. Are there warning signs or things that, just say a truck guy could tell just by, hearing the truck idle, driving it, something like that? Or is it something where they need to take the truck to you and have you guys diagnose it to know if something's going on?
There's a few typical warning signs that to look for, especially if you're in the process of buying a truck. Typically, the injectors, when they first kind of start on their way out, it's generally spool valves that start to fail and solenoids before anything. So a lot of times when those start to fail, you'll notice a hard start first thing in the morning when the engine's cold, and it may miss at idle until the oil temperature warms up. So those are things to look for. When you first start the truck, does it fire right off and idle nice and smooth, or does it kind of have a choppy idle until the oil temperature, comes up a little bit? Other things you can do, sometimes even if it does start up smooth, you can take it for a drive right away. And when you get a lot of load on the engine, especially in overdrive, and you're not, don't have a lot of RPMs going on, you'll notice the truck start to shudder, or maybe a lot of people describe it as a shaking, but actually it's the injectors misfiring. So that's the other thing, the other scenario where they kind of start to go, and you can, see those warning signs coming on, and at that point you're probably looking to be, doing fuel injectors in the near future.
Now, when you have a truck come into the shop and the truck experiences, those things, you guys know the set's bad, or the stock injector set's bad. What are some tips that you give customers as to, should you do a modified set? How's the truck being used? This is what we can give you a bit more fuel with the injectors that you build. What's that process like?
So typically people are not sure what they want to, if they want a stock set or an upgraded set. The first question we ask them is, one, are you happy with the power your truck makes? And two, what do you use the truck for? So if someone is completely satisfied with the power their truck makes, is not really looking for added power, obviously a larger set of injectors is not going to do a whole lot for them. A lot of people want to install them in hopes of better fuel economy. That's kind of debatable, but we usually don't see increased fuel economy from a larger injector. If they're happy with the stock power, we recommend them going back with stock injectors, because without, introducing modified parts into the equation, the truck will naturally be more reliable. However, if they do want a little more power, if they're towing a lot, want some more torque, especially in the lower RPM range, we can definitely build them a set of injectors that will accommodate that. We do a lot of our stage 1 or stage 2s, which are 155cc or 175cc injectors that are great for those type of guys that, tow, want a little more power. And a lot of it depends on how many different supporting modifications they have to support a larger fuel injector. So just all those things come into play, but the first two questions we ask people are, are you happy with the power, or do you have a horsepower goal in mind, and what exactly do you use the truck for?
How much will the stock turbo be able to handle as far as an aftermarket set of injectors before you almost need to do both upgrades? So do an aftermarket turbo and then go with the aftermarket set of injectors.
Yeah, you can definitely do it either way. You could install a larger, if you wanted to do one at a time, you could. Optimally, you would like to do both at the same time. You can install a larger turbo with stock injectors, or vice versa. It's kind of the beauty of having the custom tuning available with the SCT. If their injectors are headed out and they don't really want to spend the money on a turbo, stage 1 or stage 2 injectors are completely fine on the stock turbo. We would just, have the custom tuning done to pull that fuel back so it could handle it. But we have a lot of customers who run our 155 and 175cc injectors with the stock turbo and zero complaints on them. So stock turbo can handle quite a bit, but it's the custom tuning that, allows you to do that.
Now, when you do, say, a set of stage 1 or stage 2s, do you have to do custom tuning with it as well, or is it just best to be able to dial in the whole system, so to speak, and give the customer, the best performance, that they can have with injectors and tuning and things like that?
So the stage 1 injectors, the 155 cc's, those will run perfectly fine on the stock tune, no problems at all. But you really don't make a lot of use of the extra fuel available without tuning on the vehicle, especially custom tuning. Any bigger than the 155 cc though, most builders on the 175 cc and larger injectors actually plug the spill ports on the fuel injector, and in that case you don't have to have custom tuning, but if you don't have custom tuning, it could cause a kind of a lopey idle. It kind of sounds like a misfire and a few other, little things. It won't necessarily hurt anything, but it's just not the most, it's not a fun truck to drive without the correct tuning.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we had got a question on iTunes on our review section, and this gentleman had a 6-liter, and he was kind of in that position where I don't think the injectors were bad, but he wanted to know, how should I approach going to an aftermarket set and how to tie it all in together. And I saw on your guys' Facebook page, you have tons of injectors, but then also turbo packages as well to be able to bring that whole system together. And, if the guy's going to be towing or just wants to make a certain power level, you guys have all that there to put together a program for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing for them to do if they're kind of looking for a custom tailored setup is really just to call us and kind of tell us what our goals are for the truck, what they use the truck for. Is it a daily driver? Is it just a truck driven on the weekends, maybe taken to the drag strip or the pulling track? Or is it a truck that tows every day? And then if they would want to let us know, what they're looking to spend, we can definitely build pretty much any package to accommodate their needs as far as injectors, tuning, turbo goes, and make suggestions on, what they should run based on our experience.
Now, once a customer does an injector upgrade with you guys, what are some tips that you give them to protect that investment? So with the oil, how often should they change it? What are some other things that they can do to make sure that they have, the best oil and the best maintenance to protect that upgrade?
So oil is definitely a biggie. It really depends on what kind of oil they're running. I usually tell people that are running your typical 15W40, Rotella or Jello or whatever, they use. Normally I would change that on a 3,000 mile interval, maybe 4,000, but not much more than that. Then of course, if you're using a higher quality synthetic oil, we use Lubrication Engineers oil a lot. It's worked really well for us. You can definitely extend those drain intervals, but anything over the 5,000 mile mark, even with that, you would want to send out an oil analysis, to get it checked out before trying to run at 10 or 15,000 miles or, anything above that. The other big thing is just making sure that they use OEM quality oil filters. We see a lot of aftermarket oil filters that just aren't held to the same standards and actually can bypass oil without being filtered. So those can cause damage as well. So for that reason, we only use Motorcraft, Raycor, or International oil filters because they're all that OE design. The other big thing to kind of protect their investment is fuel pressure and fuel quality, as with most diesel trucks. So what we usually recommend is even if you're installing a set of stock injectors or upgraded ones, no matter what size injectors or what supporting mods you have for your fuel system, that you hook up a fuel pressure gauge and check the pressure before and after install to make sure it's maintaining pressure, because you never want to see lower than about 45 psi of fuel pressure. The range that we usually tell people is anywhere between 45 and 65. And you definitely need to check that fuel pressure under load. Sometimes they'll idle perfectly fine at 65 psi, and as soon as you mash on the throttle pedal, they'll drop to 10, 15 psi. And anything lower than that 45 psi can damage fuel injectors. So we generally tell people, regardless if you have a fuel system or not, you want to make sure everything's operating correctly and make sure that you are maintaining fuel pressure, whether it's, you're just putting a gauge on to check it or putting a permanent gauge on, to monitor it on a day-to-day basis.
That's some great advice. I think in diesel performance in general, a lot of times we'll buy parts and upgrade our trucks, and then we kind of forget about, well, how do I maintain it and protect, what I just bought and what I'm doing to the truck to make it last? Because it can be very reliable with aftermarket parts and making a bit more power, but you got to do your due diligence and as a truck owner, make sure that you're following maintenance schedules and just protecting that whole system.
Yeah, and the other thing is there are some oil bypass filter kits out there and things like that, and aftermarket fuel filtration systems, and all that stuff can definitely prolong the life of your fuel system as well. It's not necessarily necessary, but all those things are nice things to have to protect that investment, because it's definitely not cheap to buy a quality set of fuel injectors, so it's nothing that you want to be doing on a yearly basis or anything like that.
As far as the labor to swap a set of injectors, how much time does that take, you say professionals like you guys and at your shop, to do that on a 6-liter?
Most shops will charge between 6 and 8 hours to R&R a set of injectors on a 6-liter. We typically charge 6 hours. That is including a oil change. We always do fresh fuel filters and oil change when we install a set of injectors. And then do your typical updates through the system as we're there, update the oil rail standpipes if they haven't been done so, dummy plugs, valve cover gaskets, etc. So it just depends on how much of that stuff you're replacing, but typically we charge 6 hours, and we're right around that margin by the time we get it done and test drove and fuel pressure checked and whatnot.
How many customers walk into the shop and they want to race that? They want to go fast.
We get a lot of people that call and walk in and just, they want to go fast. They want a truck that runs in the 10s in the quarter mile, something like that. But a lot of people just don't realize how much actually goes into that, how much money that really takes and work to get there. So a lot of times when you start putting all that together and putting numbers together, not so many people end up wanting to go that route. So it does happen quite a bit, but it doesn't happen, a lot of people, I guess, don't follow through with it necessarily once they figure out all that's involved with it.
When you have a customer that, they're all in, they want to do that, how do you specify the injectors you're going to put to their truck? So they want to run, say, a 1090, and they're unsure of the turbo they need to run and all the other things. What are questions you ask someone to be able to really dial in that set of injectors that you're going to build? We
would ask, one, what kind of engine modifications do they have? Do they have supporting mods, connecting rods, pistons? Do they have the airflow, the heads, the intake manifold? What kind of turbo they're planning on running, if they know at that point. Those are all questions we'll ask them, and based on, what they have, we'll pair a set of injectors for them. And what I normally tell people on something like that, I even go a little bit bigger than what might be necessary, because you can always pull that fuel back in the tuning. And then, if, you're cleaning up all the fuel with your turbo set up, you can always go back in fairly easily and adjust the tuning to command a little more fuel. And it's easier than swapping out injectors. So within reason, we tell people to go maybe a little bit larger on something like that and then pull it back. You can only pull fuel back so much through the tuning, but that's typically what we would do.
That's a theme we've heard from a few different guests, is whether they're on the tuning side or injector side, is it's better to be able to pull the fuel back a little bit than to try to push a smaller injector to the limit of what it can do to try to make that power and keep it reliable and the longevity there.
Yeah, and what happens is if you're trying to really push a smaller injector, especially if you're racing something at higher RPMs, you really want that fuel injector to spray and empty the fuel into the piston bowl as it's coming up. And if you're really, maxing out those injectors, commanding a lot of injector pulse width, what happens is the injector is still spraying after the piston is already headed back down the cylinder. At that point, you're really not making a whole lot more power, but rather just, more smoke and higher EGTs because of the additional fuel. So you want to be able to empty that fuel injector into the piston bowl at those higher RPMs for, racing scenarios and whatnot.
I saw, again, on your guys' Facebook page, you have a ton of trucks in the shop, and you got a lot going on. As far as our fans out there who want to, they might have some specific questions, regarding their truck, or they want to stop by the shop and talk with you guys. What's the best way to get in touch with you, your crew, and you set up a time to come in and chat with you guys or get some work done?
Anyone's welcome to stop by anytime. Like I said, we're here in Sarasota, Florida. The best thing, honestly, is either probably a phone call. Our phone number is 941-217-4159. And then also we have our website and Facebook page. Our website is holdersdiesel.com. And the phone numbers are on there as well as emails if they wanted to contact us for possibly getting some work done.
Yeah, I've almost been overwhelmed with the number of 6-liter owners that have been just clamoring to get more information on, are their injectors okay? If they're not, what size should I go to? How do I put this all together with, my turbo and the plans for how I want to use the truck? And you answered all those questions for them. And I know you're going to get more as well. These the podcasts tend to generate a lot more questions off of it. But the expertise that you have in helping us learn as well, what to look for in these trucks, and then how to think about not just throwing a new set of injectors in it, but how do I want to use the truck? Am I going to be towing with it? Am I going to take it to the track? And fitting that all together is really helpful.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I like to tell people is when you are shopping for your injectors, just do your research, look for somebody reputable. It's not something you want to cheap out on, or try to save a dollar here or there on possibly a less of a quality of a product. So a couple of things to look for if they are shopping for a fuel injector or something like that is, one, what kind of reviews does the company have on their fuel injectors? How many people recommend them? And then also the other kind of telltale sign is most 6.0 and 7.3 injectors are rated by cc's and nozzle size rather than just percentage over stock or horsepower over stock. So I tell people to generally shy away from injectors that are maybe advertised 80 horsepower, 150 horsepower injectors, and look for the companies that actually advertise the specific size those injectors are.
It's so hard to compare them. You're right, because it's if the customer and the shop or the manufacturer aren't speaking the same language, it's really hard to compare apples to apples, so to speak. And that's so important with something like an injector, whether it's a Powerstroke, Cummins, Duramax. If something goes wrong with that injector, or it's not built with the quality and the standards that are expected, it'll take out an engine. And that's more expensive than the injector set.
Yeah, it can definitely cause catastrophic engine failure, and we've seen it before. It's never a good situation for anybody involved. So that's why we encourage our customers to shop around and really do some research on who they're purchasing their injectors from.
I really appreciate your time today. Like I said, I learned a lot, chatting with you and learning more about what you guys do and how you do it, and the process that you go through to make sure customers are taken care of. And definitely would like to have you back on, in the in the future. Maybe talk more about some race sets and some different things you guys are doing there in the shop, and hoping to push the 6-liter Powerstroke farther, because it's come such a long way really fast. I think especially with events like UCC and different things like that, it's just the power that they're making and what they're able to do has just grown a lot really fast.
Yeah, they've come a long way, especially here in recent years. They're making a lot more power than they used to, and it seems to be more and more every year. And a lot of that, is driven through stuff like UCC and competition. Everyone, trying to make more power and coming out with new products. So it's definitely what kind of fuels the innovation of the fuel injectors in different parts of the 6-liter in order to make them, more powerful, more competitive in the diesel world.
Awesome. Thanks again. Like I said, I appreciate your time today, and we'll sit back down and chat here a little bit later.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and check out ATS Diesel and Dan's Diesel Performance if you're looking to do anything to upgrade your truck, whether it's towing, racing, sled pulling, or just a little bit more performance out of your setup. Go to atsdiesel.com and dansdieselperformance.com. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.